Welcome to another episode of Dear Parents. Today we're going to talk about ultra-processed foods, and I wanted to use this as a jumping off point to discuss it because there was a recent article in the Journal of the American Medical Association that caught my attention about ultra-processed foods and children's behaviors. I talk a lot about behaviors, I talk a lot about nutrition and the impact of nutrition on ADHD and anxiety and the behaviors that we see in our children, and so this one caught my eye. Now, before we get started, I want to first and foremost say that I don't want you to feel any shame or guilt about your current or past ultra-processed food use, because what we can do with the information that we have, I think, is come up with a playbook to get to a better place. It's not that ultra-processed foods have to be completely eliminated. You're not going to, create a burn pile in your backyard and throw out all those Z-bars or other, squeeze pouches and those sorts of things. We're just going to figure out some ways to change our habits just a little bit and see the results that come from that. These foods are literally engineered to be irresistible to kids and make life temporarily easier for parents, which is why we all get hooked on these ultra-processed foods and that we continue to purchase them. One of the things that I was reading about recently when it comes to ultra-processed foods is they are specifically designed to keep you buying, to keep getting more profits. And I'm not like a big conspiracy guy or anything along those lines, but there are really good studies that show that yes, ultra-processed foods can be labeled as clean or organic, or, they have added vitamin D or whatever, so that you are reassured in purchasing it that, okay, I'm going to get, yes, I shouldn't buy this. Yes, it's more expensive, but it does give me some vitamin D. They specifically engineer these foods to maximize profit, not nutrition. And so this is a study that was in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Over 2,000 preschoolers were followed starting from ages 3 to 5. And at age 3 in the study, ultra-processed foods made up about 50%, so 45.5% of the daily energy of these preschoolers. And I actually am unsurprised by that number and was expecting it to be a little bit higher based on the exposures that most children get from ultra-processed foods. Real food made like things like fruits, vegetables, plain meats, eggs, those sorts of things, only made up 38%. In a moment, I'm going to talk about what defines an ultra-processed food, because that's not always an easy thing to know. What they found, though, in studying these children is that more ultra-processed food exposure at age 3 led to worse behaviors at age 5 across each domain that they looked at. By age 5, children with ultra-processed food exposures that were higher had more anxiety, withdrawal, aggression, hyperactivity, consistently more behavioral issues across each domain compared to their peers that had less ultra-processed food exposure. And we're not talking about cotton candy or Dr. Pepper. There was a time where, those Z-Bar boxes, we had to figure out a plan to buy them in a larger bulk. I mean, we were at Sam's, Costco, or Amazon getting those Z-Bars, especially the green ones. I don't know what it is about the green ones, but those ones were a big staple in my adult diet at one time in our life. The things that we're seeing that are the ultra-processed foods: packaged sweets and desserts, breakfast cereals and breads, chicken nuggets, hot dogs, juice boxes, squeeze pouches, sweetened beverages, ready-to-heat and eat meals. These are ultra-processed foods, and many of them are labeled organic or clean or helps get your daily amount of vitamin D or riboflavin or whatever it might be, specifically because it gives parents this false sense of security. Well, yeah, I'm buying this, but it helps, it's like giving them a multivitamin. Well, it's not, because it's full of ultra-processed foods. Yes, they threw in some vitamin D. Yes, they threw in some riboflavin, so that as your eyes look at the nutrition facts and settle on, okay, look at the bottom here. Yeah, but there are all these vitamins in there. And that is part of the reason that that parents, are lulled into this ultra-processed foods aren't so bad. But we know from a individual health and from a public health perspective that ultra-processed foods are really harmful. Now, it can be tricky to identify, like, is this food in front of me actually ultra-processed? There is a scale, it's called the NOVA scale, that a lot of researchers and people use to define foods from, like raw carrots that you just literally pulled out of the ground, wiped the dirt off of and ate, to the Twinkie. And so in between there's a lot lot of gray area. The easiest rule of thumb there's a couple of easy rule of thumbs that I use because I don't want parents to be looking at the labels and necessarily trying to figure out what every ingredient is. Does this mean it's ultra processed? Two easy rules of thumb that I have is, one, does it arrive in plastic and has an ingredient that you can't find in your home kitchen? Then it is very likely to be ultra processed. Another rule is that it has, if it has a health claim on the packaging, it's very likely to be ultra processed. Other rules and questions that you can ask yourself is, could you make this at home? If you flip it over and read the ingredients, are all these ingredients things that either I already have in my kitchen or that I could source from the grocery store without having an advanced biochemistry degree? Cellulose gum, carrageen, sodium stearyl lactylate. These aren't foods. These are industrial inputs that are added to make foods more palatable and shelf stable. If you couldn't make it in your kitchen, like if you had the ingredients, if you went to the grocery store and bought the ingredients, then it's ultra processed. Now, that's not to say that all chemicals are bad. I mean, I've seen the memes where people like post the chemical composition of a blueberry to try and dispel this myth that like chemicals are bad for you. Blueberries are full of chemicals. We are talking and looking at about industrial additives that affect flavor, that affect texture, that affect shelf life, and that's really what we're focused on here. So that's one way to look at it, one question that you ask. Number two is, could it survive in the backseat of your car or in your diaper bag for 6 months? Unless it's like a can of corn or beans or something like that, minimally processed food goes bad within weeks, even in the fridge. You can make energy bars at home. Actually, I will post this week on my Substack the bars that we eat. Like we used to buy Z bars, like I was saying, but honestly, with 6 kids and 2 adults, like it's just too much of the food budget to buy those fancy Z bars. And so we make our own. Our kids help make them. They have like oats and honey and chocolate chips and cranberries and peanut butter. They are really tasty. I think they are gluten-free, as I like work through in my head what the ingredients list is. But we make those at home, and they wouldn't last for 6 months because our kids like gobble them up, and so do we as the adults. But if we made those at home and left them in the fridge for 6 months, they wouldn't be good anymore. Like the food is not designed to be shelf stable, even in the fridge, for that long. You can't make something that's shelf stable, individually wrapped, and identical every single time at home. So if it can survive in your diaper bag or in your backseat for 6 months, ultra processed. And then does it have a marketing campaign? If it has a marketing campaign, it's probably ultra processed because from a big corporation, in which case the purpose isn't to get your child the added vitamin D or riboflavin or whatever thing you look on the package and say, oh, it's got some vitamins in it. The purpose is to maximize profits for the food producer. And so they need a marketing campaign to try to get you to buy more of that. Eggs don't have an ad budget. Apples don't have a tagline. The more a food has to convince you that it's healthy, whether it says it's organic, whether it says it's natural, whether it says it's clean, if it has to try and highlight those things for you, ultra processed. Now, why are ultra-processed foods contributing to behavioral changes? And why are children that have more ultra-processed food exposure at age 3 at a higher likelihood of having issues with aggression, hyperactivity, anxiety at age 5? What is the deal? There's a couple of different theories and mechanisms that could be in place here. One, ultra-processed foods tend to be lower in some of the nutrients that our children's brains actually need. Yes, you look on the package and you see, oh, it has vitamin D in it. I'm going to give my kid 3 Z bars today. They tend to be lower in iron, they tend to be lower in zinc, they tend to be lower in omega-3s, and they tend to be lower in folate. Those are nutrients, vitamins and minerals, that directly support brain development and emotional regulation. So right there, if we're displacing the foods that come from the garden, that we make for ourselves, that are not extensively processed with ultra-processed foods, they usually have lower quantities. Yes, they will add some in, but it usually isn't the same. It isn't as bioavailable, and it's usually enough just to make the packaging look okay rather than what your child actually needs. Ultra-processed foods also crowd out nutrient-dense foods Nutrient dense have higher density of vitamins and minerals that are critical for neurotransmitter function. And so when we are eating more ultra processed foods, we keep consuming those foods over and over because they're palatable and our brains want more of them and they feel unsatisfied when they eat them. So we crave more and more of them. And what that does is it crowds out those other nutrient dense foods because there just isn't the stomach space to get those in, to get the exposure to all of those different vitamins and minerals that our children need. There's also a lot of research and studies looking at the gut-brain axis. When we eat more ultra-processed foods, we have lower microbial diversity in our gut, which does affect inflammation. It affects neurotransmitter function. It affects the way that our gut supplies neurotransmitters and amino acids and different biochemical molecules. That sounds very nonspecific, but the ingredients for the neurotransmitters that fuel our brain. When we have less microbial diversity, it leads to changes in our gut bacteria, which affects our brain and our brain neurotransmitter function and inflammation. Now, there also, in some cases, like all these ultra-processed foods come in plastic. There's higher rates of phthalates and BPA, and young children are even more susceptible as an endocrine disruptor to these. So when we eat a lot of the food that is wrapped in plastic and sits, on a truck and is exposed to higher, temperatures and the fluctuating temperatures, and then sits on a shelf, the food gets exposed to the packaging that it's in, and that can cause more issues for our children when they eat them in large quantities, when 50% of their diet is coming from ultra-processed foods. Now, there are some limitations, obviously. Correlation is not causation. Kids that eat more ultra-processed food might have a lot of other factors that go into place that result in the behaviors that we see. Their parents might be more stressed out. They might be getting less sleep. They might be getting more screen time. Researchers tried to adjust for a lot of those variables to try and say, like, in this child, when we've, socioeconomic status, parent stress, all those sorts of things are similar. Do we see that? And in some cases, the answer is yes, we still see that when they've worked through and eliminated all those other things. Now, one of the things that was the good news from this study is that what they modeled was that when you swap just 10% of the ultra-processed food calories for real food, scores in the behavioral realm improved across every domain, which says to me, you don't have to completely change your child's diet. You don't have to throw out all the foods and grow your own foods. I mean, growing your own foods is great, but a lot of people do not have the time, energy, or interest in growing their own foods or having that be the bulk of their diet comes from that. You can slightly reduce your ultra-processed food exposure and see an improvement currently and in the years to come in your children. And that's what this JAMA article showed. You don't need to have a perfect exposure to ultra-processed foods, but what you do is you do just shift the habits and patterns a little bit and see an improvement there. So what this actually looks like in practice, what's the take homes here? One is you don't have to clear out your pantry completely. You don't have to swap out all the foods that you're eating or avoid every packaged food. What you can do is pick a couple of different things to slowly swap out, delete the supply that's in your home, and then not replaced. Juice pouch, switch it out for water. Keeping fruit and cheese in the fridge at eye level, that's something. Not restocking when we run low on goldfish or bars every single week, that's something. These small intentional changes that we can make and actually save money with, beat dramatic and unsustainable every time. Now, I talk a lot about the authoritative approach to different parenting issues, and so I want to talk this through from an authoritative lens too. A couple of different things when it comes to parenting, because yes, maybe you can stop getting more goldfish or more bars or whatever it might be that your child is currently surviving on in large part, but then you're gonna have to face an angry toddler that's saying like, I want my, whatever it might be. First and foremost, make it not an issue by letting the stock run out and announcing it in advance. Oh, this is the last Z-bar. I'm not particularly trying to pick on Z-bars. This is just one that resonates with our family is, this is the very last green Z-bar. So just FYI, I'm just kind of putting it out there so that maybe my kids hear me and say that. So what you're going to do is quit stocking it and let the supplies run out. And I would pick one hill. I wouldn't just stop getting everything, but I would pick one thing. Maybe it's goldfish or Z-bars or whatever it might be. Once it's gone, say, I mean, you try and give a heads up of, hey, this is the last day that we're going to be having goldfish or something along those lines. The kids are just like chewing their goldfish. Yeah. Then you say, oh, nuts. We're out. Let's find something else. And you have a couple of options readily available that they can turn to. So for the things that you have decided this is the hill for right now, it's we let the supply run out, we announce it as it's running out, and then we say, oh, nuts, or oh, shucks, or oh, bummer. And then we move with our child to find something else. This works exceptionally well because if you stop stocking it, there's no other solution. Like, hopefully you're not going to say, well, I'm going to run to okay, let's just go to the grocery store and get more. Instead, what you're going to do is help your child work through the frustration of, I'm out of the thing that I usually like to eat at this time. When they ask for another, you just say, oh, nuts, we're out. And then you help them move through that. Now, for things where we haven't yet, this isn't the hill yet, but we do want to be intentional. Like sometimes they'll have 3 Z-bars. Now we're only going to have 1 Z-bar per day. What we're going to do is we're going to plan that in advance. We're going to tell them, hey, this is your Z-bar. Remember, later you will not have another Z-bar. And then when they want another one, you just say, oh, we already had our one for today. I know that you're upset. Let's find something else. I know that you're upset. Let's find something else. Authoritative is warm and structured. Authoritative is warm and it holds a boundary. I know that you're upset. Let's find something else is that exact authoritative script that you're going to use. So in the big picture, let's be intentional about the ultra-processed food exposure that our child gets on a regular basis. If you go from 45% to 35%, you're going to see an improvement in their behaviors now and in the years to come. And then you might find, hey, we went down from 45% to 35%, and everybody is still here. We figured it out without having this, that, and the other thing, as our go-to in our diaper bag or on the shelf or readily available. We were able to do that, and now maybe we can go to 25% and see what else we can do. I will post on my Substack the recipes that we use for some of the things. We do a lot of overnight oats that the kids love. We do the bars that everyone really likes. There's plenty of different things that we've done, mostly from a cost perspective, because paying for all of the ultra-processed food for 6 kids is really cost prohibitive, but also to decrease our exposure to those. And it gives the kids an opportunity to be involved in preparing those things. And it gets us less ultra-processed food at a cheaper cost. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. Before you go, I wanted to let you know that later this month, I'm starting an authoritative parenting study group. This will be an opportunity for parents to learn authoritative practices and approaches and actually put them into practice in their home. I am really excited about this because it's a really unique, I think, way of delivering the information. Instead of a bunch of course lessons or a bunch of Zoom meetings or things along those lines, I'm going to deliver a little authoritative parenting nugget each day to you over text message. So you don't have to remember to log into a course. I'm literally going to show up in your text messages every day with a little bit of learning for you that takes just a few minutes. And then each week we will also have a Zoom meeting where if you're available, you can attend live. And if not, you can submit your questions in advance where we talk through authoritative principles and approaches. And then we have time for cases and question and answer. So if you've been saying, I'd really like to figure out a parenting approach that works right now for my toddler or my elementary school kid or my teenager that can grow with my child and my family, check it out. The link is in the show notes, and I would love to have you join us and learn authoritative parenting practices and approaches, because if we look at the authoritative approach, we know that it is the best studied over the last 60 years and has the best outcomes in the short term and long-term for both kids and parents. Authoritative means we have structure and warmth. And what that delivers for us as parents is the opportunity to put boundaries in place, to hold those boundaries, and to connect and attune with our child. So if that's something that you've said, I need an approach, I need somebody to help me figure out how to do it, check out the link in the show notes for the Authoritative Parent Study Group. I will tell you that we have a limited number of seats, but we have it so that both parents can join. And so I want both parents, it's the same price for both parents to join, rather than like you have to add a parent or pay extra or anything along those lines, because I want both parents to be able to experience that. Now, if you're a single parent, or if you say my spouse would never do this, you can use that same like extra ticket seat for grandma, for another caregiver, for a friend that you just want to do it with, so that you can both experience that. You each get get your individual text messages each day. You get your individual Zoom links and all the different things so that you all have that. You get the entire experience, but it's for 2 adults rather than just for 1. Ideally, if both parents, are in the home and are willing to do it together, then everybody can be on the same page. If you're interested, check out the show notes. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. If you have thoughts, if you have feedback, if you have comments, complaints, questions, go to Substack, find this. The link is in the show notes, and let me know your thoughts or what you've done to decrease your ultra-processed food exposure and also to see how things have changed for your family as you've done so. Keep up the good work.